Hi everyone, welcome back to Experiences with Experity. Girls, we're on episode 6.
Wow.
That's crazy. So this month we're focusing on strategic planning, and we're going to be talking all about why it's more than just setting goals, and actually we think it's about aligning a few things, we think. So that's people, culture, leadership, and specifically during moments of big change like mergers, organisational shifts. And the idea today is that we're going to have a discussion. I'm going to help facilitate a discussion about all things mergers, acquisitions, and the effect that it can have on an organisation. So, ladies, how are you feeling about that? Excited to talk about something a bit different this time?
Yeah, I think it will be good. I think quite often you see businesses doing business as usual really well, and then when
Yeah.
something happens or changes, then quite often you find that things get missed, really basic things get missed, and the people experience is the first thing to fall down. So, yeah, I'm really excited about the conversation that we're going to have today.
So that being said, then, firstly, what do we think are some of the biggest sort of people-related challenges that companies could possibly overlook during those times of change? So that's mergers, acquisitions, organizational shifts. Like, what are our thoughts around that?
I would say I have two main thoughts on this of where I've seen businesses completely miss the mark on these points. So the first one is quite obvious, really. They're thinking about the business goal only and not about their people, not about the impact on whether that's the employees or whether that's the customers themselves, customers or clients. It's just about how can we achieve X, which is great. And every business should be thinking about that period of growth. However, if you're not anticipating or thinking about the impact of your customers or your team, then the change might happen, but you're going to lose or have a negative association with those people groups, if you like,
Yeah.
in the long run. So it therefore doesn't really become as successful as intended, because retention might be affected, loyalty, commitment are all going to be impacted as a result of change without thought of the people at impact of it. I'd say the second thing that often gets missed, which is probably as a result of the first one, is communication. In a big period of change, a lot of businesses can fail to provide an appropriate level of communication in their strategy to navigate the change. They've got communication happening at a stakeholder level where you've got people that are either buying, selling, merging, doing the project, doing whatever the change is happening at that strategic level. And then you've obviously got all of the people at impact, as we said, the customers, the team. And we think about the communication to get everybody that they need on board up here. And then the communication isn't as well thought out with those other people on the ground. And I think that's a problem that I've seen happen time and time again. Things that have not been done so well, but also some businesses that have done it incredibly well because they've actually prioritized the communication that's happening for the ground and for the people that are at direct impact. And I think that's one of the easiest things for businesses to misinvest in or get wrong. So they're my two thoughts on that one.
Well, because
I
I
think,
think, sorry, I was just going to say, I think that change can have a negative association to it for employees and customers. Change can be scary at the best of times, and it can invoke fear, it can invoke all these feelings, which ultimately lead us to make decisions, like business decisions, like buying, purchasing, selling, all of those things. And if it's something as simple as communicating that change, we're thinking, I've been on the other side of it. Maybe I can touch on that in another point, but I've been on the flip side where, as an employee, it's not that the change has happened that's bothered employees or affected employees. It's just that no one was told about it. And then it comes as a shock, and then all these feelings kind of like come off the back of that, don't they? Where you go, but we weren't told. But how has this been happening and no one's been talking about it? Even if it's just simple communication about, we're thinking of going through a merger, we're thinking of going through an acquisition, at least people can better prepare themselves mentally. And yeah, sorry to cut you off, Miss. I just wanted to mention that point, which is something so simple.
yeah.
But what were you going to say? Sorry.
I was just going to say, similar along the lines of both of you, where I think quite often when communication doesn't happen, that's when like the rumor mill starts happening, when those negative feeling, like assumptions start being made. So even if you don't have the answers, almost having something, even if it's just a reason why the change is going to have to happen rather than actually what's happening, can almost stop those rumors from happening because you're giving them at least some answers and they're not filling in the gaps between the lines. And I think that's where, I don't know, I just think that culture starts to break down if that communication is lost. And I think as leaders, it's really easy to think you have to have all of the answers before communicating it to people. And there are some things that you can't communicate to your wider team. That's just part of being a leader, I think. But ultimately, communicating something and communicating even just the reason why can help in that transition and can help in that change. Like, yeah, I feel like that's the thing that I would add to your guys, to be honest.
I find that really interesting because something that we often talk about here at Experity is how powerful culture can be, or how powerful a good culture can be.
Yeah.
And if you're just sticking to good culture, or you're adhering to all your mission, your values, and everything your brand or your company says you are, then I think that change can be really positive. And something then, I guess, off the back of that culture piece that Melissa just mentioned, then is how can companies use their culture then almost like as a lever? Because I think communication is a massive part of culture. It's a massive part of why employees feel valued, heard, listened to, is just through something so simple as communication. So what do we think about using culture as like almost like a strategy then?
I would say it's a really important angle, and I think dependent on the culture that you have in your business currently will actually tell you how robust and how resilient your business and your team are going to be to go through the change that you're intending to go through. So I think having culture is almost like a strategic understanding and lever to know, are we going to be able to sustain the change? Are we going to be adaptable, dynamic enough to take the change on? Is the first way that culture is going to help us be able to do that. And I guess the other part of it really for me is if you have a culture of values, transparency, honesty, trust, if they are the values that you carry and that's the culture you've built, as a leader, it's imperative that you lead by example. And a period of change in that dynamic within your business, if you aren't honest, trustworthy, open with your communication, asking and listening, providing feedback, asking for feedback, then you're not living by your own values, and that then discredits the business as they're navigating this period. You've got to encourage a whole team to come on that change journey with you, but if you're not actually on board with it yourself, you're not living the values that you're expecting your team to live by, then how is the change going to be successful? So I would say that's my biggest input on how culture and values can be used for change and communication, really.
Definitely. And I think culture is like a constant, and it's constantly evolving and it's constantly changing. So even if you're not going through change right now and you're not putting strategy in right now, ultimately starting to build a culture of people being able to take risks and being comfortable enough within the company to take risks, or not being afraid to fail as long as it's a strategic failure type thing. And I think ultimately having a culture of being adaptable and innovative will only help you when you're a company that's maybe changing quite often, or a scaling company. I think Experity is a great example of that. I feel like we've got a culture of just real open communication, and I think that's something that I've never experienced in another company before. It's always been that actually you kind of give feedback and that's a negative thing, but at Experity, I would say we have a culture of seeing the positives in any feedback and seeing it as constructive feedback. And that's only going to help us with strategy and as we grow. And I think if more companies are looking at their strategy in a way that, looking at their culture in a way that it can only strengthen their strategy as they grow, then it's a win-win for the employees that are experiencing that culture, but also the movement that's happening from that culture being a thing, because your employees all of a sudden feel more empowered to make the moves and to make that change. And I think it's just one whole piece, definitely.
And I would also add to what you've just said is hiring the right people for what you want to achieve with the business. As a leader, you have an idea on where you want to take the business or where the next few years is going to be for that business. So when you're thinking about strategically hiring, that's an important consideration to have. Is this person going to be aligned to our current culture? And are they going to be aligned for culture growth? So you've got culture fit and you've got culture growth. Do they fit in both of those camps? How resilient are they going to be in change? If we are a business like us, I suppose, that are constantly evolving and changing and moving, how are they going to be receptive to that? How are their values going to uphold during periods of change? Because if you know you're going to go through multiple iterations or through a big change in the near future, if you've not got the right people in the team to do that and they aren't aligned to your culture and your values, then how can you build a strategy that's going to keep everybody in the boat where they need to be on that journey? So that was just what I wanted to add off the back of what you said there, Melissa, because I think that was really good what you pointed out there.
I think it's really important also what Melissa said on that cultures, it's a constant, it's forever. I think it's forever evolving, forever changing. The future of that culture also is, I think, in some way depicted by how you as a leader are hiring, how you're changing, how you're adapting to change, how you're pivoting with, or changes come and go, don't they? They happen all the time. And I think it's about how you adapt to those changes as a leader, kind of puts you in a spotlight to say, like, this is how we should adapt to change. You kind of have to practice what you preach, don't you, really? And that kind of puts me on to my next point, which is the future. So we talked about hiring for culture fit, but for culture growth. Let's talk about then like the future of strategic planning, because I think something that's kind of overlooked when it comes to possibly the industry is we've got AI now coming into play. We've got data and insights around more than ever. There's so many resources now available. How can then businesses and companies use AI, data, insights when planning or considering strategic planning or for their strategic planning? How can they do that in a safe way? Can we talk about some of the things that maybe we're doing here at Experity? Can we talk about tips for incorporating AI without risk, possibly as well, girls? Like, what are our thoughts around AI for strategic planning?
I mean, I'm like a strategy nerd. You guys know that.
I was waiting for it to come in.
Data and like knowledge, like the more information I have, the more empowered I feel to be able to make decisions. And I would say that I know we talk about strategy a lot as like long-term goals and longer term, but for me, I think strategy is a part of the everyday. You should look at everything you're doing and see how you can develop it and grow it. And I think AI has only actually aided that. There's so many different platforms out there for AI, and I think you have to be really clear within the company and set clear boundaries for how you want your employees to use AI. Ultimately, there's almost, if you give them too much scope for it, then it can cause problems, obviously. But for instance, within Experity, there's an AI tool called Perplexity, which is actually great for data because it basically trawls the internet and it gives you references for each of the points. So how we tend to use it for a strategy is look at what's going on in the market, trying to see trends, trying to find kind of statistics that are happening. But the great thing with something like Perplexity, and I think other AIs are starting to catch up now with it, but is actually that you can then go into that reference and see for yourself and read for yourself. And it's meaning that employees can get their hands on data quicker, which means then that they're freeing up time to actually implement the strategy. And I think gone are the days of having to have people trawling the internet to try and find statistics, or going out and doing, I mean, it's still a great thing to go out and do studies or to talk to your customers and to ask them for feedback. And I will never say don't look at your reviews, because I think that's so important, and we went back on that with our customer side of things anyway. But AI is just that tool to look at the wider picture and to actually grow the company and to look at that next strategic step, is my feeling about it anyway.
To evolve on your point, I'm going to challenge it slightly, because I've got an opinion on the reviews piece that you mentioned at the end.
Yeah.
I think AI has its place in gaining feedback and reviews. So if we've got people coming onto courses led by the Experity team, they have an AI generated feedback form that is produced by a business we use called Tracks. And that essentially allows us to create a form which gives dynamic feedback questions to the attendees of our course. It creates an AI generated review based on everything that they've said, and enables and encourages them to go and post it on, say, Google or wherever they're posting, wherever that's happened. We've done it for ourselves. We've also implemented this system in for clients as well.
Yeah.
So I think AI really has had its place to enable us to get that feedback easier and better.
Yeah.
And the second part is we also can use things like AI and data and insights to amalgamate the insights from the feedback that we get, because let's face it, we're not going to sit and manually read every single survey one, because I'd love to do that, but we rarely have enough time to do that. So AI really enables us to understand exactly what our attendees of these courses are looking for, how we can help them, how we can adapt the courses, and be able to provide some of those solutions as well, so that we've got data-driven decision making. And that's something that one of our other clients talks really, really passionately about as well. So I would say AI and data and technology nowadays is definitely enhancing our ability to make better decisions, as you say. For me, one of the things is I love to use AI for certain purposes, but when it comes to building a strategy, I actually feel, as a leader myself, I almost don't want AI to influence too much about how I pull that strategy together. And the reason why I say that is because the business was built on a little bit of data, but a lot of it around passion that I had and desire I had, backed up by data and the needs of the market and the industry. But if I've created a strategy that I'm then going to be sharing with the team, in the recruitment process, potentially, onwards to other people and other influences, they need to see and feel and get the passion that I had in my business in order to feel bought into the journey that we want to go through. So that's the big thing for me, is just making sure that we don't lose that leadership, that personality, that touch in everything that we do.
Yeah, definitely. I think
I love that.
Yeah, same. I think you need that personality and you need that experience from it. And I think if you can use AI to aid that with your employee pulses, with your customer experience surveys, with all of those things, and AI is becoming such a thing that is integrated in day-to-day life. Even something as simple as social media now, you get a monthly report that AI puts together for you and tells you what your top performing videos are and stuff like that. You can actually accumulate so much strategy and data from that, to really empower and to just grow and improve the business. Yeah, definitely.
I think that because AI is so easily available at our fingertips, we have to be really careful about the way we use it. And it's very easy now to go to AI to ask it to, build something for us or create something for us. But I think ultimately, when it comes to a strategic plan or comes to a business strategy, I love Abby's take on the fact that it has to be true to who you are, or your reasoning, or your core of the business and what you built the business on, because then I do genuinely feel like employees will feel that. And I think we probably speak on behalf of obviously all employees at Experity, Melissa, because currently it's just us two. But I don't think I've ever felt like anything's been overly curated, or anything's ever, coming to us with these ideas of growth. It's never felt like AI has driven that. It's always felt like something purposeful has driven that. And I think the future of strategy, of course, let's have a hybrid like we are day to day here. Let's do a little bit of pure purposeful thinking, but let's also put in AI for things that can just be done quicker, or the information's there. Can you summarize those types of things? I think are okay. But no, I really love hearing everybody's points on the future of what we think that's going to look like. And I think when it comes to Abby, and she being our leader here and in that position of management here, when it comes to you, Abby, do you feel like, I want to just touch on leaders now, because I think it's really important that building a business strategy it's not easy. It's going to be time intensive. It's going to be quite a vulnerable task possibly for you to do, which is to think about long-term planning or future planning of what you want that strategy to look like, and to also make sure that we stick to a strategy. And there's a lot riding on a leader to create a business strategy, I think. And I think sometimes what we're seeing at the moment is possibly leaders lacking time or lacking resource. And what are our thoughts around how that can impact then strategy? So let's say, for example, leaders lacking time, leaders lacking resource. What does that mean for strategic planning, do we think?
Good question.
A meaty one, isn't it?
It's a meaty one.
I would say I could probably speak on behalf of pretty much every leader, in the essence that they are always, in every facet of their business, going to lack time and resources. Particularly if you're in a small or medium-sized business, a lot of responsibilities and roles still sit with you, whether it's to actually action or to sign off or delegate or manage or do, that we have this constant battle of working on the business and in the business. And with leaders, even leaders as part of boards still have a deliverable responsibility within the business. So I think lacking time and resources is a constant for leaders. And I think then it really just comes back to, how do people, I suppose, really dedicate the time to committing to focusing and evolving the strategy. When I've spoken to businesses about this, and even when I think about it myself and I'm met with that constant barrier, I always say to myself, I'm struggling with the resources or the time to be able to commit to this, but actually, what is the implications of me not doing this, of me not dedicating the time, of me not being able to invest into creating this outline or guideline or playbook or whatever you want to call it, in order to keep moving the business forward? Well, the answer to that is the business can become stagnant. The business loses its sense of direction and drive. The team lose that sense of direction and drive and clarity. And therefore, that's then not going to create a great environment for customers to then feel connected with who we are as a business and where we're going as a business. So I think the implications of not doing something is the reason why you actually should be committing to it. And I think because we are talking about this from a people experience point of view, it's about what experiences will be better as a result of the strategy. How will our team's experiences be better? How will their performance improve? How will their empowerment improve? How will they feel more connected to the business and the brand and everything that we're doing? Same for our customers. How are they feeling connected to who we are, why we are, being proud to say that we support them and talk about us? Those people experiences are so significant to our ability to be successful, as we know. So it's that I suppose I look at it on the flip side. And in terms of then, okay, right, well, I've now understood the implications. I now need to know what I need to do in terms of that strategy. It doesn't have to sit with you. I think that's the answer is you're either a leader that likes to delegate a lot and likes to use a lot of help and support, which is fantastic, or you might be a leader where I've been, where there's been times where I've been really nervous about giving stuff up and nervous about asking for help and nervous about getting in extra resources. And I think really the success is you either need to take stuff off your own plate to make space for the strategy work, or you delegate. It's as black and white as that. You need to do it now. You either do it yourself and delegate some of the other tasks, or you work with somebody to create this strategy together and you help get the outside perspective so that you can be better at pulling it together.
I think something I've seen you do really well, or I feel like you do well, this might just be me, is you prioritize. So I feel like it's more of a if this doesn't happen, what are the implications of it? You said it there, but what if this does happen, what can it solve? What can it actually solve all the things that are on my to-do list if I just attack this? Or will it help contribute positivity into something that's actually not going so well right now, which you're talking about, I think, when you said there, sales teams or sales leaders, let's talk about sales leaders as an example. Say, for example, they're feeling some type of way about, I don't know, their team or somebody specific in their team, or something's not going right in their team. If there's a strategy, if there's a process, that's going to filter down and that's going to possibly fix or help to fix the issue at hand. And actually prioritizing a strategy, it shouldn't be an afterthought, right? It shouldn't be something that leaders are going, oh, I'll just get round to it when I can get round to it. And I think that's something I've seen you do really, really well, is actually, no, it needs to happen. Other things on my to-do list are a priority, but this is just more of a priority. And I think that filters down into Melissa and I. And I think that's why I feel so connected to Experity's growth and our strategy here, is because I see it, I feel it, I hear it, and I would be doing everybody a disservice if I'm not living that and breathing that every single day. And I think it's something so simple, but you definitely practice what you preach. And I just wanted to mention that, because I think it's very easy for us to sit here and say, oh, you should be doing this, but actually, like, genuinely, Melissa, what are your thoughts?
I completely agree. I completely agree. I think you've both touched on it as well, but the main thing that I would say is that there's actually a real risk of kind of half-hearting it. There's no 50-50. You need to either delegate or re-look at the tasks, because ultimately almost doing that 50-50 and not doing the whole job can create real risks with strategy. And we spoke about it earlier with that communication, because quite often the leader will kind of do the strategy and put it all in place, but then not communicate that to the wider team because they don't have time, or ultimately the work's been done, so they don't need to communicate it. But again, that's when those barriers start coming down. And I think that's a real risk of leaders that don't have the time. And I think it's probably one of the things that slips first when you don't have the time. They kind of you start doing the strategy or you start putting stuff into place, but then maybe leaders get frustrated when it hasn't carried down to the team and have forgotten that it hasn't been communicated to the team, or whatever it might be. And I've seen that quite a few times in organizations where a leader's put a strategy in place, but it hasn't funneled through the system because that communication has lacked. And I think ultimately, that's really important, and it's important to carry it through the whole way. And if you need support with that, if you need to go to the people around you and say, okay, this is what we want to put in place, this is why we want to put it in place, can you then communicate it to the wider team? Then ultimately that's also a power in itself, being able to have that support around you. And I think it's really important.
But isn't that so funny, because something you've just said there is about creating good culture, being able to communicate in itself with your team to say, I need to get this done, or I have to get this done. Would you mind just taking this off of my task list or to-do list? That's good culture, isn't it? And is it not really funny that we're talking about so many different elements of strategy here, but they are all actually link back to each other, which is like communication, talking to each other, being open, being honest, creating a good culture that says, actually, I need to get this done. I need to practice what I preach as a leader. I just think it's funny, like we're talking about different elements of a strategy, but actually the fundamentals are all pretty much the same. Yeah.
I would say on that, you know, I want to thank you for your feedback, because I appreciate that you guys have seen that I try my best to prioritize and give that. But we as a business are a culture of change. You know, we are 2.5 years old as a business. We are evolving daily, and I know I wind you both up when I come online with a new idea or a new thing, and the priorities have shifted one day, and that can be quite frustrating. I hold my hands up. So I guess the thing is, actually, if you've got a team that are aware of continuous change and continuous improvement, that's fantastic and that's really important. But also, we are like in any given day, the priorities do change, and so you need to be able to adapt. The second piece was interesting. I don't know if either of you have seen the interview with Stephen Bartlett on it was an American talk show. I think it was Jimmy Kimmel, not really sure. But Stephen Bartlett on a talk show recently over in America, and he'd done an interview with them, and they were talking about their experience as being interviewed by Stephen Bartlett. Have either of you seen it? Because some of you
I saw a snippet of it. Is this the one where he had no idea who the person was and the team had given him the wrong notes?
No.
Okay.
That probably doesn't sell itself with what I'm about to say, actually. But but no. So he goes on. I'm sure it's either Jimmy Fallon. I think it's Jimmy Fallon or Jimmy Kimmel. Anyway, one of them. The Jimmys. He'd gone on this talk show and said, I was interviewed by Stephen Bartlett a couple of months ago over in the UK. It was absolutely incredible. They knew everything about my life. They'd done this thing. They put this mixtape together. And he basically said about every little detail that Stephen and his team had put into preparing for the interview. For the follow-ups from the interview, he'd got a gift to go away with him of basically it was a scrapbook of photos of their interview at the end of the interview to go and take away. And he said, oh my God, like, how did you do all this stuff? You orchestrated so many different personal touches in our experience and interaction. And Stephen Bartlett's big thing was, in our business, we do sweat the small stuff because the small stuff matters. And I would say I resonate with that. I can really, I'm sure I wind you both up where I'm sweating really small stuff because I think that tiny little tweak matters, or I think that thing matters. And it's a short-term pain for a long-term gain, in my view. But Stephen had said it really, really well in the interview, talking about sweating the small stuff and why a lot of businesses say, oh, don't sweat the small stuff, and a lot of personal growth and stuff. In some cases and in some contexts, yes, you don't need to sweat the small stuff. But when it comes to business and when it comes to that experience, I think it's really imperative, and also with strategy, to sweat the small stuff.
Yeah.
The strategy is going to change all the time, but if you can get it as precise as you can for the time at which it was created, then I think it can give you maximum impact in your ability to deliver really great experiences for your team and for your customers as well.
Are the small things not ultimately all adding up to a big thing anyway? Is that not? Yeah, and I guess I do see that here, which is just to clarify, not annoyed when Abby comes online with new ideas and new products.
No, me neither. But I think that's building a culture of adaptability, right? I would say we've all got quite a big culture of adaptability.
And it's making me a stronger person, so I'll thank you for that every day. But no, I was just going to say I buy into the vision fully, and I think Melissa and I both agree with that, because we know that there's a bigger picture, Abby. Like, we know that there's so much more behind it, and for me, it's whatever needs to be done, we just need to get done. And I think that's possibly that culture piece that you're talking about, is that's going to keep changing, and there's going to be more people, but they're going to have to buy into that mindset, because I think that's what makes us so successful as a team, or it's what makes our culture here at Experity. Mind you, there's only 3 of us. I think it's what makes us so special is I've never experienced what I experienced here, even in a corporate job. So we're doing something right. But yeah, I just wanted to clarify that it makes me a stronger person, and I'm not on the way to fight.
I love your resilient nature. Thanks, Shiv.
Paid me £500 extra to say that.
I've got a bit of a rogue question, and it probably does fit in with strategy, but just an interesting one. If leaders are listening to this, and they've got bigger teams or they've got bigger companies, how could they start to go about building that culture like what we've got as a team? And I think we talk about it a lot, about how we're able to adapt to change or how we're able to navigate these things. But how can that be recreated in larger teams? And if you're wanting to start putting that into place, I thought it'd be really interesting to have that discussion, because I think if we're saying that culture, and I do believe that it does have a real impact on strategy and how your team is able to cope with strategy, but a lot of companies out there maybe don't have the culture that they want at the moment. And I've got my own thoughts on it, but I'd love to know your guys' thoughts on kind of how you can start to grow and adapt that, because like I said earlier, culture isn't it's a constant change. It's not just a one and done, that's our culture. It is what it is. It can change. But yeah, I thought I'd get your guys' thoughts on that.
Shiv, are you going to go first? I feel like I want to hear what you've got to say on this one.
It's really interesting because I think I've been part of a corporate entity or multiple corporate entities previously to this that have done it so wrong, or that haven't done it right, I should probably say, that have filtered down, or it doesn't even feel like it's filtered down. It just feels like employees bear the brunt of bad culture. And I genuinely say this with like experience, and I think it comes from the top down. And that's not to say that leadership teams don't understand culture. It's not to say that if you're, an MD or you're a CFO or a CEO, whatever, that you don't understand culture, because ultimately you set up the business for a reason and you have a purpose. But when that's not communicated in the right way, I think employees suffer and I think culture suffers. So I think my big takeaway has always been it starts from the top down. And again, not just to say this because I want to say it, but I think the fact that we're so early on in Experity in our journey here, it's right. We're right at the start of it, and it absolutely comes from the top down here. Abby lives, breathes, works Experity every single day. She pretty much bleeds Experity. And I think that that's really important, because
it's leading by example, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that it comes from the top down, because the moment you start to see those cogs shift or the blocks fall apart, whichever analogy you want to use, at the top, ultimately the employee is always going to feel it first, I think. And I don't know if they think that we just don't notice it or that we don't feel it. I don't know what that is. Like, surely, like, I used to talk to a lot of my past, colleagues and friends about this, is surely they get it. Like, surely they understand, like, the conversations that are happening in the organization or in the businesses. It's not positive conversation around change because it's not being filtered down in the right way. It's not being done in the right way from the top down. So that's my take on it.
I agree with you, Shiv. I think there is a really strong piece there on being aligned as leaders, as a leadership team, and that misalignment and the impact of that misalignment and how that can filter through and impact the team's ability to shape and evolve the culture positively. There are elements of your culture which you can control and elements of your culture as a leader that you cannot control. Leadership alignment is something you absolutely can control. So if you have an existing leadership team, ask yourselves, have an honest, difficult conversation. are you all on the same page about where the business is going, about how to lead a business, how to manage teams, how to communicate with a business? And if I was sat in that room, I'd be saying to the team of leaders that I would be sat with, if you're not aligned to this, that's totally fine. But we aren't then destined to work together right now, because that isn't where the business is going. That isn't the value set that we want to carry. That isn't the trajectory or the direction that we want to take the business. And be super clear about that and honest. It's absolutely fine if you are not on the same page, but then don't remain in the business not on the same page, because as you say, Shiv, everyone can see it. And if the people at the top are not getting on, then the rest of the team aren't going to feel that sense of direction, clarity. It's almost like the easiest way I can see a like for like analogy in everyday life is like parents. The leadership team is like the parents, and the employees are the children, effectively. And when you have parents that bicker with each other in front of the children, and one is good cop and one is bad cop with the children then know they can play up to this one and they're going to be more disciplined by the other one. And so there's no consistency of their behaviour. Not that I'm a family expert by any means, but you see it time and time again. And you see continuous like feedback and data showing that a lack of consistency with authoritative figures shows a lack of behavioural change, adaptability and alignment on the ground, I suppose. So that getting clarity is really important. And then the second thing is the bits that you can't influence, or the bits that you can't specifically control, and that's what's happening. But the things that you can do is you can control how you respond to it. So when you put people together in teams, they will have different dynamics. They'll have microcultures, there'll be friendship groups, there'll be different mutual relationships that are going on in and amongst your team, and you can't really influence that too much. But what you can do is you can do something called cultural listening and cultural feedback. So just observe the atmosphere that's going on around you, observe the cultures that exist within your business silently, without input. Be a fly on the wall in a team. Go and sit with a team for a day and go and figure out how they are. Sit with them for a week, who cares, right? Just embed yourself into that subculture, if you like. How do they speak to each other? How do they interact? Where are the sticking points? What are they really strong at? What are they perhaps weaker at? And that might be different depending on which department you're in, or there might be a running theme throughout the business. So that's the cultural listening piece. That's you not actually saying or acting on anything, you just absorbing. And the second part of that is the cultural feedback. So ask your team to describe the current culture, atmosphere, describe their colleagues, describe how they feel about work. Give them that 360 opportunity to share how they perceive the business, because it'll be different to how you perceive it. And then collate that data, and you'll find the common trends of people, or most people think this, most people feel our culture is this, most people have described our culture as this. Ask them those questions, make them feel heard, and then from that you can work out, is this the culture we want to create? If it is, fantastic, how can we protect that? If it isn't, what do we need to do to try and influence that culture to start making a shift as we navigate this next period of growth, stability, whatever in business?
And that ultimately filters into the business strategy, doesn't it? I find that really interesting, and I love that question, Melissa. What are your thoughts though?
I think, two things. I think firstly, what Abby's just been saying is that's where our culture audits can come in really handy. Like, I think because having an anonymous person to do that as well, I think is great. But I think the main thing that I've taken from it is that almost that culture and that strategy is a bit of a circle. If you don't have a strategy, then your leaders aren't being able to create that culture because they're not all aligned. But then if you don't have that culture, then the strategy often then doesn't get implemented and put into place. So it's that circle. If you don't have one without the other, you're not going to be able to execute it in the best possible way. There might still be outcomes out of it, but you're not going to get exactly what you want, and you're not going to be able to drive forward. And I think they go so hand in hand, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to ask it, to be honest.
No, absolutely, and they do go hand in hand. I think it's something so simple. Really interesting conversation today, ladies. I love how open we've been about some of the topics here, and again, just being able to bring it back to the Experity story, I think probably for listeners and people watching helps them realize that actually we are practicing what we preach here, but we do truly believe in everything that we're saying here, and I think that's really important. Yeah, shameless plug, you can find a culture audit on our website, and I'll link it in and I'll link it below. Thank you so much, ladies. As I said, really interesting conversation. Any final elements before we wrap up and say bye today?
Don't think so.
I don't think so. I think we've covered a lot.
We've covered a lot.
Yeah, I think so. I think the only thing that I would add is that we're always here. A communication thing is such a big thing for us, and I think ask us questions, have those discussions with us. Like, you can probably hear throughout this conversation, we're all passionate about what we're doing and how we can support companies and organizations and leaders. So we want to be challenged. We want to have those conversations with people. So if you've watched this and want to reach out, then I'm sure Shiv can put all of the contact details as well below in the caption.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And we'll see you on the next episode of Experiences Experity. But for now, see you later.
Bye.
Bye.